I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
One thought he was invincible. The other thought he could fly. They were both wrong. Welcome to Real Action, and on this episode, we're looking at 1990's Steven Seagal classic, Marked for Death. I have to be honest with you, Real Actioners. This is one I've been waiting a long time to do. Whatever Seagal is now, with a bunch of direct-to-video titles to his credit, few action stars made a splash with their first few films quite like him. And I think it's safe to say that for a stretch of time, he may have been the top action star of the period. Certainly, he was the most unique. Marked for Death was just Seagal's third film, and by now he was already red hot. Seagal wasn't like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone, and many saw him as the antithesis of Jean-Claude Van Damme. He wasn't overly muscled, wasn't a bruiser, and yet he didn't have the finesse of Van Damme. His attitude was a little bit The Sopranos, a little bit NYPD Blue, and yet here was this guy using a martial art that many in America had never seen before, especially on the big screen. Seagal was a practitioner of Aikido, which wasn't about fancy kicks or hard punches. It was about momentum. So Seagal's fights were quick and brutally efficient. They barely lasted a couple of seconds before he'd break your arm, throw you out of a window, or clothesline you straight to hell. Audiences had never seen anything like it, and it made him a superstar with 1988's Above the Law, an underground hit that became a quick favorite for fans of the genre. He followed that up with two films in 1990, the revenge flick Hard to Kill, and finally, Marked for Death. Marked for Death is wild. Part vigilante justice, part revenge flick, part funky Jamaican voodoo mysticism. This thing was weird and awesome and crazy violent. Seagal plays disillusioned ex-DEA agent John Hatcher, who returns home for much-needed R&R with the family, only to find that his hometown has changed. The burbs have been invaded by a drug-dealing Jamaican posse. They're everywhere, selling drugs to the kids and ruining the neighborhood. They're also picking fights at bars, as bad guys are wont to do. And when Hatcher fights back, not only does he become a target for the Jamaicans, but his entire family is marked for death. Dun dun dun. To make the Jamaicans more formidable than the typical goons Seagal faced in his earlier movies, he needed a really far-out bad guy, and he got one in Screwface. Played by character actor Basil Wallace, Screwface was steeped in dark magic that terrified the entire Jamaican community. He carried a sword called the Rod of Correction, and was so badass he took down the Colombian mafia without breaking a sweat. He can't let Hatcher's disrespect stand, so he puts out a hit on his family and nearly kills Hatcher's niece. Hey, I recognize that girl. Why can't she stay out of trouble? There was this exotic feel to Marked for Death that other action flicks just didn't have. It's not every day you get a movie with occult rituals bathed in chicken blood and a cow's tongue hung on the door like the Jamaican version of that horsehead scene from The Godfather. In the middle of all this supernatural mumbo-jumbo was Seagal, who grounds it with his combat that just looks believable and vicious. I personally think he's at his best here, syncing up with veteran director Dwight H. Little to create some really special fight scenes. While Seagal favors the action to be up close and personal, what I like about Little is that he gives him a wide berth. The mall sequence is the one everyone remembers, and for good reason. It's Hatcher taking on 3 Jamaicans as chaos breaks out around them. We see everything, and that sets the perfect tone. To be fair, Seagal and Hatcher are really just setting up all of the things these poor guys are going to get hurled into, but it's still cool. No glass display case shall go unharmed. This fight really is great though. At this point, the Jamaicans have severely underestimated Hatcher, but it's here that he shows just how far he's willing to go. While two of them watch in astonishment, Hatcher twists one guy into knots, then kills him so coldly it's not just a shock to them, but to us. This after being willing to put a hostage's life at risk just to get to her attacker. Who is this dude? He's a friggin' machine. Little is far from the biggest name director of the period, but he would follow this up with the blistering Rapid Fire, starring the late Brandon Lee. A few years later, he would go on to direct another real action favorite, Wesley Snipes, in Murder at 1600, and remains pretty active today with his most recent film in 2017. This despite having the dreadful Tekken movie to his credit as well. The script was written by Michael Grace and Mark Victor, who came up with the idea after reading an article about Jamaicans taking over the suburbs. Seagal actually sued for full writing credit, claiming to have rewritten 93% of the script. He lost. I don't know how the Jamaican community felt about their portrayal in Marked for Death. Truth be told, other than Screwface, most of them don't say much but blood clot and bomba clot and Irie. This poor guy says it so much, he can't even finish without getting tossed through a jewelry case. But this was 1990, and Jamaicans as drug-dealing gangsters was all the rage. I wonder if these guys ever hooked up with the Rastas in Predator 2. Many in the cast, including Basil Wallace, were of Jamaican descent, and the script was worked around their input to make the dialect as authentic as possible. Seagal is surrounded by a terrific supporting cast, many of which he would go on to work with many times. There's the always awesome Keith David as his football coach pal Max. Max is personally affected by the drugs invading the neighborhood and joins in the fight. But I mean, come on, it's Keith David. When is he ever not a badass? And hey, is that a young Danny Trejo? Sure is. The two would reunite again for Machete years later. Polish supermodel Joanna Pacula plays a voodoo specialist, yeah, seriously, and will later work with Seagal again in, wait for it, My Giant. But Seagal found something special with Basil Wallace's performance as Screwface. We could do an entire video on the awesome quotes Screwface has, many of which are part of my regular lexicon now. I don't get out much.
Everybody want go heaven. Nobody want dead. If a man commit a crime against you, he must be paid back 1,000 times. I want you to meet my sister, goddess of fire.
Screwface just radiates menace and mayhem, which can be directed at anybody, including his own men.
And if you can't kill him, I go kill him. And then I go kill you.
And there's a Shyamalan-like twist to his character that throws Hatcher for a loop and makes him believe, albeit temporarily, in all of the supernatural stuff he'd been denying for the entire movie. Seagal was always very careful about crafting his persona, both on screen and off. I mean, just look at this gear up scene where they build their own firepower from scratch. Like real men. It wasn't often Seagal had any bad guys who could compete with him physically, and sadly, Screwface was a foe who tapped into Hatcher's rage more than anything. The final fight scene is memorable for how one-sided and goddamn ferocious it is. He literally slices Screwface up, bit by bit, even goes so far as to gouge out his eyes. It all fit within the hyper-violent bounds of the film though. To that point, Marked for Death was so graphic, it had to be edited down just to achieve an R rating. This explains why some of the fights have some weird cuts, and why footage shown in trailers didn't make the final. The film was still so bloody, it was singled out by the National Coalition on TV Violence that year. To show just how popular Seagal was at the time, both of his films in 1990, Hard to Kill and Marked for Death, made almost exactly the same amount of money, around $59 million. Seagal would follow it up with Out for Justice, and then hit the big time with 1992's Under Siege, which had him square off against the wild pair of Gary Busey and Tommy Lee Jones. It would all kinda go downhill from there, but there's no denying the cred Seagal had built up in his first few movies. So maybe in the long run, Seagal wasn't invincible, but for a while, he sure did fly.
One thought he was invincible, the other thought he could fly.
So?
They were both wrong.
Marked for Death gets 9 out of 10 Stallones. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JOBLO Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support.